Welcome everyone to the Lo-Fi Poli-Sci Podcast. I'm your host Michael Pickering, and that's right, Lo-Fi as in low fidelity, low quality, in your face, messy as can be global news show. Here we're going to talk about that famous question, what's going on in the world today? We'll be covering 5 headlines from across the globe and then choose one to go into a more detailed analysis. The news, fresh off the press. Source, Reuters, World Section. Australia aid plane to Vanuatu delayed as Chinese plane was parked at Port Vila Airport. As we reported last week, Vanuatu was hit by a devastatingly powerful cyclone, or hurricane. Australia sent the country aid. However, when a Chinese plane also carrying aid was already at the airport, the Australian plane, after circling the runway multiple times, turned around and went back to Australia, over 1,200 miles away. A plane delivering aid returned and delivered the aid the following day. The implications. Although for many listeners we tend to think of the China-US rivalry, an Australia-China rivalry is nothing new in the region. As both countries are known to deliver aid to areas in need in the Pacific region, the delivery of such aid is also seen as increasing diplomatic ties with neighboring countries. Such ties can and do manifest into influence in trade and political partnerships. As China has been spreading its own influence via the One Belt, One Road initiative, shoring up economic partners, Australia also has been competing for those same close economic ties. Reuters further states that the Australian government did not provide an immediate response as to why the decision was made to turn the plane around, only to deliver aid the following day. Next up, source, the New York Times, politics section. Bernie Sanders endorses Joe Biden for president. On Monday, the two politicians made a collaborative video appearance discussing their support for each other in an effort to take the White House in November. For the Biden campaign, this endorsement signals hope to create an earlier and larger coalition of Democratic voters moving toward the general election. The implications. Bernie Sanders' endorsement is important, but this doesn't mean that all of his supporters will automatically come out to vote for Biden. In the 2016 presidential race, there were many Sanders supporters that did not get behind the Clinton campaign. It will be interesting to see if this early alliance will yield a more fruitful relationship between Biden himself and Sanders supporters. Our following story. Source, Reporters Without Borders. 2 Jordanian TV journalists arrested after broadcasting criticism of lockdown. The 2 journalists were interviewing people on the streets that were airing their discontent with not being able to work and provide a living for themselves and their families. The implications. Reporters Without Borders ranks Jordan 130 out of 180 countries and territories in 2019. And Freedom House gives a 2019 Freedom score of 37 out of 100 with a partly free ranking, although it should be stated to listeners that 37 out of 100 is quite close to the not free category. It's important to remember that in the world today, with everything going on, different countries are responding in a multitude of ways to the current conditions. Freedom of the press and freedom to criticize one's government publicly is not a universal freedom across the globe. Never take that for granted, Lo-Fi listeners. And now for our headline in the Spotlight segment. Source, AP News International. North Korea fires barrage of missiles from ground and air. On the day of the North Korea's founder's 108th birthday, and the day before parliamentary elections in South Korea, the country launched missiles from fighter jets and ground stations into the sea off its eastern coast. At this time, a source within the South Korean government stated that the missiles were believed to be short-range cruise missiles, though this report is unconfirmed as of yet. The background and implications of the story. This is the 3rd time in 3 weeks that we've brought you news of North Korea testing missiles, at a time in the world that everyone is worried about anything but the North Korean nuclear talks, which have been stalled since before the beginning of this year. We've asked Lo-Fi listeners before, what can the country do, or what can other countries do to stop these tests? And would that even be possible? In this particular case, however, it should be stated that it is not uncommon for the North Korean government to do such weapon testings to mark major anniversaries in the country. These acts are a show of force and pride for the country's military and leadership, a way of self-acknowledgement that they have survived this long in spite of the West's effort to change the trajectory of the country since the 1950s. A new question for Lo-Fi Poli-Sci students. Can the country continue its trajectory moving toward the 2050s? Write in and let me know your thoughts. And a last piece of news from Reuters, World Section. Forest fire around defunct Chernobyl nuclear power plant put out, Ukraine government says. Remember that 27-year-old genius that liked to start fires for fun around formerly exploded nuclear power plants? Yes, the one from last week. Well, thankfully, the fires were extinguished as they dangerously approached the site where a large amount of nuclear waste is stored. The implications. This was an amazing effort by firefighters to stop the blaze before a possible catastrophic event took place. We are not lucky, we are fortunate. The brave firefighters were able to do so. However, we may not always be so fortunate as to have someone else mend our mistakes. So all of you 27-year-old fire lovers, put the matches down. For all of us. And especially for your friendly neighborhood firefighter. And that's a brief snapshot of what's going on in the world today. Please write in with your questions, comments, and requests of countries for our news segments to lofipolisci@planetmail.com. That's Lofi, L-O-F-I, poly, P-O-L-I, sci, S-C-I, @planetmail.com. Let me say thank you so much for listening. Stay safe, wash those hands, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Lo-Fi Poli-Sci podcast. Pickering, signing off.